Hello and welcome everyone to this final episode, at least for this book. Okay, The Vedic Age. We have finished this book. Read the last few pages of this book today morning itself, and we are going to look at some of the things that that chapter has revealed to us and how it relates to the contemporary world. Um, how does it explain anything? Because somebody might ask, okay, what is actually the purpose of this series? Okay, the purpose of this series is not to educate you about something. Let's say I've read something in this book and I'm sharing that fact with you. No, that's not what I'm doing here. What I'm doing here is I'm bringing out a certain perspective. Okay, one of the perspective for that example is, let me just arrange the camera. Okay, so one of the thing that I'm trying to bring out from this is the falsity. I don't know if that's the word, if I can use that or not, but yes. Okay, these false narratives about the history of our country that have been propagated, that have been taught to us in the name of history in our school. Okay, so how do you reconcile it with what is that is available in the Upanishads, in the Vedas, and all the other scriptures? Okay, so that is the purpose of this series. If you're a history student and you really need to learn about the history and everything else of this country, I would recommend you actually sit down and read this book. But okay, if you are, let's say, a working person, you have some duties and work otherwise, you simply just want to know, okay, what are some discrepancies in the things that were taught to us in the name of history in our school, then this video series is for you. Okay, but I would also recommend, if there are history students out there watching this series, I would not say no that you don't watch this, but keep in mind, yes, okay, if you really want an in-depth study, I would recommend you read the whole book. Okay, I myself have, and all I do in this series is try to bring out certain perspectives. Okay, as to to give you an example, we have so far established that why is this like this? Yeah, okay, all right. So yeah, if you really want to do an in-depth study, I would really recommend to actually sit down and read these books. But like I said, you have other commitments. Okay, then you can refer to this series. There are simply some discrepancies in the history that was taught to us in our schools, and that is what I am bringing out through this series. Right. So yes, like I said, the last component in this chapter is about the economic condition. Okay, largely wealth was something that was looked upon as something that was desirable. Okay, as you will see, the fact that there is a domestic right synchronizing with each stage in the agricultural life of people. Okay, in any given state. Okay, the state of Punjab and Haryana, obviously they have some festivals that coincide and resonate with the spirit of harvesting of crops in the fields. But similarly, all the other states have such festivals or such rituals where they will worship one or the other deity when they are harvesting certain crops. Okay, so this cannot be a mere coincidence. Okay, and these practices, you cannot date them with accuracy, meaning nobody can claim with absolute certainty that this practice or this ritual, let's say for example Baisakhi ritual, started at this date. Okay, so yeah, so these were the traditions, and R.C. Majumdar on page 529, he mentions the very same thing. The fact that there is a domestic right synchronizing with each stage in the agricultural life of the people, and practically none associated with urban life, shows that the Aryans of those days lived mostly in villages, and to this very day, I think somewhere close to 20 or 25%. I may be wrong about this, but yes, a large part of our population still resides in the rural areas. And when you say rural areas, you mean villages. Okay, it's only a small part of the entire population that lives in urban areas, right? Yes, so and a village agriculturalist was the true representative of Aryan Bharat. There was one, obviously, when something was very beneficial to you, obviously you are going to worship that thing, and that is some that was usually practiced. So yes, there are also examples of a goddess, okay, goddess of agriculture. Cow was the center of economy. Cow was the currency, you can say, of those days. All right, so the wealth was usually counted in the number of cows you had, your success, everything else. So cow was a yardstick to measure your wealth, your power, and your capabilities. Okay, like in our previous video, we also discussed this, how cow was sacrificed for the hospitality of the guest that arrives at your place. Okay, suspension of study is ordered in the presence of cows that have eaten nothing. Persons riding in a chariot are to do homage to a cow if met on the way. You might have seen this, and this is a very common practice. Okay, not in the urban areas anymore, but if you go outside in the outskirts and the rural areas, if you see there, if you're walking and a cow, comes in your path, okay, you worship them, and you touch their head and you worship them. Okay, and I can say this because I've seen people doing this, and I myself have has done it on a few occasions as well. Okay, so Upanishads, yes, Upanishads also mention that if you see a cow that is hungry, you're also supposed to suspend your study of the Vedas, as in for that time being, not entirely for your life, but whenever you see a cow when she is hungry, okay, you're supposed to suspend your study of the Vedas and feed her first. Okay, persons riding in a chariot are to do homage to a cow if met with one on the way. So if a person going by a chariot, okay, and that person happens to see a cow uh, on the way, okay, they are supposed to pay some homage. And you'll see this, okay, if you have not seen this uh, up until now, then I would request you to be a little bit more observant. Okay, nevertheless, the feeling of reverence for the cow went on steadily gathering volume, and the rule for sacrificing a cow was often relaxed by the admissibility of an alternative or substitute ritual whereby the cow was saved. Like I said, although in law, okay, in law it has been written down that whenever there is a guest who arrives at your place, and you are supposed to offer him and serve him with hospitality. Okay, and how would you do that service? By sacrificing a cow and feed the meat of that cow to that guest who had arrived. Okay, but this was law in letter. How was this law followed in spirit? Okay, people usually got something else. Okay, this law was often relaxed, and there was some alternative or a substitute ritual that was practiced in its place. Again, we have discussed this at length. The varieties of cloths. The varieties of cloth worn were cotton, linen, woolen, silk, and hempen. Okay, so 5,000 years ago, they are wearing clothes that were made out of these things. Okay, so it is safe to think that they must know the art and science of stitching clothes, dyeing clothes, and whatever. Okay, so otherwise, how would you explain in the Upanishads? How do they explain silk clothes? They must have known how to extract silk. They must have known how to make clothes out of that extracted silk. Okay, that spinning and weaving were daily occupations of the people is clear from the rule that the initiated boy is to put on a garment spun and woven on the same day, and from the prayers offered to goddesses who spun and wove. We may notice here the profession of the butcher, who was so indispensable in the animal sacrifice that there was actually a priest called Samitri who did the necessary slaughtering to the accompaniment of sacred verses. Okay, it's This also came as a huge, I wouldn't say a shocker, because, you know, up until now, let me be very blunt on this point. Up until now, anything that you might have learned in your history textbooks about the history and culture of this land, okay, of Bharat, is totally, absolutely, and blatantly a lie. Okay, it has layers to it, it has nuances to it that our history textbooks simply just fail to stand up to. Okay, it's not very simple to understand the history of this country. You cannot simply just read a textbook and claim to know. Okay, so here in on page number 531, R.C. Majumdar writes, indeed there was a priest who was slaughtering the cows. Okay, bridges, roads, crossways, and squares where four roads meet are referred to. Did they know the art of civil engineering during the time of Upanishads? Again, another interesting thought experiment for you guys to do. Okay, there were roads, there were crossways, there were squares. Okay, among the means of transports may be mentioned the very popular light two-wheeled wooden carriage. Okay, horses, oxen were the common draught animals, the elephant being employed for a state journey or a procession. Whenever a king, okay, state journey is basically like the prime minister goes, like in the contemporary era, how the prime minister goes to another country and visits that country. So that is a state visit. Okay, it's like the country is visiting the another country through their leaders. So that is how it was. Whenever there was a state journey, elephants were used, or elephants were employed is a better way of putting it. Alright guys, that is the end of this chapter and of that book as well. Alright, from next episode onwards in this series, we'll move on to volume number 2, that is the Age of Imperial Unity. Okay, so my final verdict, if you are thinking about reading this book, I would recommend for the people with a lot of patience, because this is rather a voluminous book, as you can see, and it demands a lot of patience, because when you are reading this book, you'll have to simultaneously Google a lot of things as well. Okay, I know I had to. Okay, there are also many technical things related to language and phonetics that might come across as very difficult for a lay person. So like I said, if you are really committed to the cause of knowing the history and culture of this land, give this book a read. But a word of caution again, that this book is based on the Aryan migration theory, which has been totally disapproved. Okay, so if you are going to read this book, read it with that in mind. All right, that's it for this video. I will see you guys in the next episode of ancient series of ancient history of Bharat. Thank you for watching.